what I taught has not only damaged British society, I think it's damaged the world.
Inside one of this country's most radical Islamist groups, the exclusive testimony of a man who was one of their leaders. Tonight, the inside story of how the Hizb ut-Tahrir organisation sets out to radicalise British youth, foment dissent, and plans for an Islamic superstate ready to enforce its views by violence. We hear the extraordinary story from the young man told that one day he would lead the organisation. A Portuguese judge begins deciding whether Kate and Jerry McCann should face charges over the disappearance of their daughter. America's commander in Iraq continues attempts to sell the war. We hear how one of the front runners for the presidency sees it.
Did today's evidence convince you that the administration is right to stay the course in Iraq?
No.
Another taunt from bin Laden, but is it genuine? And the European Union gives up trying to continue Napoleon's mission to make us act metric. Now we're really confused. Good evening. Hizb ut-Tahrir, you may have heard of it. It means the Party of Liberation. Britain has considered outlawing Hizb ut-Tahrir, but the former Prime Minister Tony Blair decided against it. They tell us they're committed to peaceful campaigning to bring about Islamic rule. Now, in an exclusive interview with Newsnight, one of Hizb ut-Tahrir's top leaders explains how the party's violent and separatist agenda has led him to resign. Majid Nawaz tells us how he was drawn into the organisation and how Hizb ut-Tahrir wants to establish a state prepared to kill millions of people to further Islamic revolution. Here's his story.
I think that what I taught has not only damaged British society and British-Muslim relations and damaged the position of Muslims in this society as British citizens, I think it's damaged the world.
Hizb ut-Tahrir, the global Islamist movement accused by some of radicalising young British Muslims, is banned in many Middle Eastern countries. It isn't allowed to hold rallies in Germany, and supporters were convicted in Denmark of anti-Semitic activity. After the July the 7th bombings, Tony Blair moved to ban the organisation in Britain, but the government concluded there was insufficient evidence to do so.
The party in Britain is central to exporting the ideology abroad, and I think London and Britain generally serves as a hub for the political and diplomatic aims of Hizb ut-Tahrir.
The debate over proscribing the party has centred on how extreme the movement is and on its stance to violence. It insists that it works through exclusively political means. For 12 years, Majid Nawaz was inside Hizb ut-Tahrir, not only propagating their views in Britain, but exporting them to Pakistan and Denmark. He was imprisoned in Egypt for 4 years for being a member of the party. Up until May this year, he was on their leadership committee.
They are prepared to, once they've established the state, to fight other countries and to kill people in the pursuit of unifying this state into one state. I was born and raised in Southend-on-Sea in Essex. I had a pretty liberal upbringing. My mother tried to raise me with liberal principles. My father worked abroad in quite a good job in an oil company as an engineer, and pretty much had sort of friends from all walks of life, from all ethnicities and many different backgrounds. In terms of my beliefs, I'd say that I remember actually saying to my friends at the time that I was agnostic.
We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power. Fight the power. Fight the power.
I was into hip-hop music, and at the time in the 90s the hip-hop scene was very political, and that sort of politicized my mindset. And on the international level there were many sort of conflict zones that I remember thinking most of them seemed to involve Muslims. And the one that really sort of struck home to me was the conflict in Bosnia. The Muslims in Bosnia were white Muslims, Europeans, for the most part blonde-haired or brown-haired white Muslims. And yet despite that they were identified explicitly as Muslims by the Serbs, and there was a genocide taking place in Bosnia. All of these sort of issues. They raised questions of identity for me. And it was at that time that I came across certain people in Southend, and they sort of aroused my anger in such a way, and then presented a sort of a one solution fixes all sort of idea. And to my 16-year-old, 17-year-old mind at the time, that made a lot of sense. And so it was just after I left school, I began attending study circles organized by people who would address these issues and then present Islam in a manner which I'd never heard it presented before, and that was as an ideology. I wanted to be anti-establishment. And those ideas sort of struck home, and they struck a chord. I felt that I was going to create a massive change in the world. My mother, she witnessed the change from early on, and she was very much opposed in the beginning to me going down a more political line and sort of politicizing the religion even. I thought my mother was very wrong. I thought she was a bad Muslim.
Keen to pursue this newfound ideology, Majid left home at 16 to join a party cell in London.
I